right, so how do we decide what to pay attention? How do we decide what is worthy of our attention and what is not? Um, Out in the world, there are certain things that tend to be prioritized. And it might be due to the stimulus itself, it might be due to our own mindset. Um, we do know that negative facial expressions attract attention. So probably very easily your attention is pulled to the one face. Everybody else is neutral, and you've got the one negative expression. Everybody else is neutral, and this negative expression isn't even that negative. It's definitely different from the others though, so it could just be that it's attractive because it's different, but it's a look of submission, and so that's not usually considered a positive expression. That's considered something that the person's experiencing something negative. Prioritizing attention. Um, so because we have a limited capacity for what we can pay attention to, we tend to pay attention to what we're trying to pay attention to the exclusion of other things. There used to be a TV show called My Bleeped Up Brain, and it was kind of a kind of a psychology show where they would show us all these errors that people make, and they would try and make the case that basically, how do we get along in life if we're walking around making all these errors? I'm going to take a different perspective when I talk about change blindness and inattentional blindness because they're actually adaptive. They actually benefit us as a species, that we don't notice changes that don't matter. We don't notice surprising things that have really no bearing on what's going on. In the last chapter, I had shown you that lung cancer study where they had embedded a gorilla into the lung tissue, and they were like, oh no, the radiologist didn't even see there was a gorilla there. That's called inattentional blindness, and that's actually an advantage. I don't want you looking for gorillas in my lung. What's the likelihood I have a gorilla in my lung? Come on. What I'm worried about is the things that are not in any way, shape, or form like the gorilla that was embedded into that lung tissue, right? I want you to look for the things that would indicate I've got lung cancer. That's your job. So inattentional blindness can look like a failure if you put it in certain ways, but it can also look adaptive if you think about it in other ways. So I've got a couple of videos here, change blindness video and an inattentional blindness video that I've got in the playlist. So I'm going to have you watch those after we get done talking. I want you to think about why we would be blind for change, or why we would be inattentionally blind. Why does that happen? One reason is for coherence. In order to make a scene coherent, to make it make sense, we have to devote our visual attention to parts of it. As I'm talking to you, I'm looking out the window, and there are a lot of things to look out the window at. But at any given moment, I'm looking at one thing or another, right? I'm not looking at the entire visual scene and understanding every detail that's in the visual scene. Sometimes I'm looking at a flower, sometimes I'm looking at a car, sometimes I'm looking at a tree, sometimes I'm looking at the bug that happens to be on the inside of my window, but there's no point in trying to do anything about him. So it's small, don't worry about it. But I'm not being attacked by a bee, but there's a bug on my window. I actually, honestly, I'm trying to ignore him or her or it. I'm trying to ignore the bug. I'm looking at everything else, right? I want the scene to be coherent. I see that there are flowers, I see there's a car, I see that there are trees. That's enough to give me a sense of what's going on outside my window. Now, when the bug moves, and in fact, that's why I even mentioned the bug, because I had kind of gotten used to the fact that there had been a bug on the window, but I'd forgot about it because it was holding still. Pulled my attention when it moved. And it is kind of creepy as you're looking through the window to have a bug that's much closer to you than anything else you're looking at. So he seems kind of large in the visual field. It's kind of creepy. But he's not really relevant to my scene. I don't need to know that there's a bug unless I'm going to take the time to try and capture this bug and get him out of here and like that, right? And don't worry, it's not a spider, it's literally a bug. We get them in the fall around here, and they're there are different names for it. They're very benign. They're some kind of just, they don't bite, they don't sting, they don't do anything. They just get in the house and crawl around. So to make the scene coherent, we have to decide what we're going to pay attention to at any given time. Right? So we have to be sort of blind to the other things. Now, if something moves in my periphery, might pull my attention. If Something suddenly got really bright, that would probably pull my attention. If there was a really loud noise, that would probably pull my attention. But in order to make it make sense, I'm probably going to choose to apply attention to certain aspects of the environment. Attentional set. So the word set is something that you see a lot in cognitive explanations. Set means expectation. So attentional set says that you have an expectation of certain things being present or certain things that are worthy of attention. So in an attentional set, you have an expectation of what's likely to be out in the scene, right? Or in part of the experience that you're having. So once you've decided, okay, so I'm going to focus on the flowers, that means that I'm probably going to notice things that have to do with the flowers, right? Like maybe the other flowers that are there, or maybe the bees that are crawling on the flowers, or maybe the rocks that are in amongst the flowers, or those kinds of things that have to do with the thing I've chosen to do because I have an attentional set that I'm out here looking at flowers, so I'm going to notice things that are relevant to the thing I've chosen to pay attention to. And then culture also can play a role as to what part of the environment we're likely to be blind to. Westerners tend to focus on the central area of a visual field, whereas people from Eastern cultures tend to focus on the peripheral aspects of a scene more than Westerners do. And so I'm describing, as I tell you flowers and other things I'm seeing, everything I described is pretty much right in the middle of the scene. Like it's right in front of me. If I came from another culture, I might have focused in on the things that were more peripheral to the scene. But I'm not, and I didn't. So, what we pay attention to is in part determined by what has been sort of encouraged in our cultural experience. A lot of times we're encouraged by people congratulating us for noticing this or that in the scene. Yeah, but did you see that? And if you hadn't seen it and everybody acted like it was really important, you're going to encode as a kid, oh, that's something I should probably focus on. That seems like something important. I don't like to be told I missed something that everybody else thought was important. And so you'll focus in on that part of the scene. And that's how culture can have an impact on what we focus on, is that kind of feedback that we get from the other members of our culture. So hopefully after having watched those two videos and seen that there were things that you missed, and I picked the second one, the unintentional blindness one, on purpose because I thought it's possible that you might have seen the original version of that, and so I showed you the more complicated one. I'm pretty sure that you missed at least one of the three things that happened. Hopefully after having seen those videos and then hearing that, well, and hearing me talk about it and then going and seeing the videos next, it'll help you to understand that being blind to parts of the environment is actually good. It's adaptive. It actually makes it possible for us to focus on the parts that we do want to pay attention to, right? So I think that's a really good takeaway. All right, I'm going to let you go watch those videos and then you'll go right into my magic videos and then I'll come back and explain these aspects of magic.